Everyone, and thank you, Kiana. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Julius Dupree. I'm a policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and part of my portfolio entails managing the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Use Program, Overdose Fatality Review, Training and Technical Assistance Program. And so today I'm going to be, it'll be myself, and I also have some support from my colleagues with the BJA Programs Office. We have Erin Feltz that's going to be available to help field any questions that come up. And Ms. Feltz is she's a branch chief with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And we also have Jocelyn Lind, who is a policy advisor with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and she does a lot of work on COSSUP related projects as well. So thank you all for joining today, and I'm just going to give a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. And also, I'm going to be disengaging my video because I've had some really profound computer problems yesterday, and I want to be able to make sure that I don't impact the bandwidth and cause problems again today. So first, we're going to just kind of talk a little bit generally about the Office of Justice Programs and BJA, just to give you some information around those two organizations. Also, program overview, just kind of give you an overview of what the I'm just going to say OFR from here on, but the OFR TTA, or Training and Technical Assistance Program, is about. And then we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to delve into some of the eligibility and application requirements. And then we'll also highlight some of the application resources that may be available to assist you with the process. And then we're going to have there's going to be a Q&A session, but if you do have questions during the course of the webinar, as Kiana mentioned, please provide those questions in the Q&A section, and myself, or my colleagues will be responding to those questions. Okay, so the Office of Justice Programs is actually one of the Department of Justice's grant-making agencies, and there's different components or different offices within the Office of Justice Programs that I'm going to highlight here shortly. Office of Justice Programs is actually one of 3 grant-making components with the Department of Justice. We also have the Office on Violence Against Women that offers grants and funding and training and technical assistance, as well as the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, also known as the COPS Office, that also offers grants and training and technical assistance. But the focus here today is really on OJP. Myself and Jocelyn and Erin, we're with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, but we do offer information around grants and policy development to support the field across the justice continuum. Then we have the Bureau of Justice Statistics. That's actually our statistics arm. They provide a lot of information to the field, regarding different programs that we administer, and various justice-related efforts. Then we also have the National Institute of Justice. That's our research arm. They do a lot of evaluations around different programs that we administer, as well as other different elements of the criminal justice system. And then we have the Office for Victims of Crime. Their funding is really focused on providing assistance to those individuals who are victims of crime. And then we have our Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention that really focuses on juvenile related programs. Then our SMART office, which is our Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, and Tracking, really focuses a lot on the SORNA work, or the Sex Offender Registration Notification Act, just really working with jurisdictions around the country to help implement those components of the SORNA legislation. Next slide, please. The Bureau of Justice Assistance, as I mentioned before, we really provide a lot of leadership around grants administration, as well as criminal justice policy development to support states, local governments, tribal justice information, or tribal justice agencies to actually help with strategies to achieve safer communities. And the way we do that is we work with community organizations, governmental organizations, nonprofits to actually help reduce crime, recidivism, unnecessary confinement, and promote safe and fair criminal justice system. And the Bureau of Justice Assistance was actually created in 1984 to reduce violent crime, create safer communities, and reform our national criminal justice system. And so BJA, as I mentioned before, we really work to help strengthen the nation's criminal justice system and help with state, local, tribal jurisdictions with crime reduction, prevention, and recidivism reduction, as well as promoting a fair and safe criminal justice system. And our focus is really around helping courts, law enforcement agencies, corrections, treatment, reentry efforts, justice information sharing, as well as working with community-based partners to address chronic and emerging criminal justice challenges nationwide. Next slide, please. And the way we do our work, or the way we support the field, is there's three different buckets, and I just want to kind of highlight both. So through investments such as providing grant funding through our comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance use program. We also accomplish this through sharing knowledge, and so we're really big on sharing knowledge around research and developing information or different materials on what works and to help build capacity to actually improve outcomes and different justice-related programs. And so we have, for instance, we have our ofrtools.org, which is a great website that actually has resources about OFRs and also best practices around certain jurisdictions that are doing the work and that have demonstrated a level of success in that area. We also do this through engagement. We actually engage through our conferences that we put on. We recently did a conference in Atlanta on OFR. It was a National OFR Summit, our forum, I should say, that we did in Atlanta. And that, through that, we were able to kind of help make connections and get and hear from other folks in the field about different ways of doing OFRs and what the challenges were and those kinds of things. So that was very helpful for us. And hopefully for those folks that attended, because we do know that it's helpful for practitioners to hear from other practitioners about the way they're doing business or the way they're implementing programs. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a poll question here because we really want to kind of find out who's on the line. So if you can answer this poll question here, it's has your organization been awarded federal grants in the past? And you'll see there's 4 different options here. And if you can take a moment to respond to that, that will be helpful. Okay, so I guess maybe we'll give it another couple seconds and then we'll close it out here. All right, so I guess we're ready to share. So yeah, it seems like most of you all have had experience with federal grants. So that's good to know. And then we have next we have and also we have a high number of folks that are new to federal grants. So we have a good mix here. So thank you for taking the time to respond to that question. All right, so now we're going to give an overview of kind of what OFR, the TTA program is. Next slide, please. So here's is what we know as far as OFRs are concerned. There are at least 40 states that we know of that are doing at least one overdose fatality review and/or building a state infrastructure to support local OFRs. And also, there are nearly 300 local OFRs at various stages of implementation. And I'm going to talk shortly about what an OFR is. Next slide, please. Just some information from one of the partners that we work with on OFR training and technical assistance. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, their National Health Center on Health Statistics, that there are some provisional data that really suggests that the rate of reported overdose deaths have continued to exceed 100,000 since 2021. Also, monitoring deaths from drug overdose helps us understand the epidemic's impact on the U.S. population and tells us how the crisis is evolving for better or for worse. Next slide, please. So the COSSUP Overdose Fatality Review Program, or TTA program, provides training and supports collaborations that prevent and reduce overdose deaths. So the goal, what this program is designed to do is help jurisdictions build and enhance multidisciplinary collaborations, helping with the collection and use of multi-sector data, as well as conducting confidential individual death reviews in order to identify trends, incidents, and gaps in prevention efforts, as well as services to inform innovative, community-specific overdose prevention and intervention strategies. Next slide, please. So the overall goal in the OFR TTA program is to support states, local jurisdictions, and tribes with efforts to prevent and reduce overdose deaths through the development or enhancement of OFRs that actually increase the access to and use of data and information sharing to enhance prevention of and responses to overdoses. Some of the objectives of the program include building the capacity to develop, enhance, and translate data knowledge of OFR multidisciplinary teams to analyze and review aggregate data to understand overdose trends, gaps, and strategies and services. There's also the objective of developing new responses and deploying resources through an accountable implementation framework to address overdose prevention strategy gaps and needs, and enhancing the quality and reach of services for the field through the collaborative approaches to actually promote and advance the work of COSSUP TTA providers. So in addition to the OFR, who would be the OFR training and technical assistance provider, we also have a number of other agencies, if you will, that work on comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance use program training and technical assistance. So we would expect the awardee to work with those providers as well. And also the objective is to really track trends and actually build tools to support the translation of knowledge of effective OFR strategies. Next slide, please. So the deliverables, I'm just going to summarize them because they're all in the they're already in the solicitation, and we just have a limited amount of time. But one of the deliverables that I would like to highlight is the building and an approach that is responsive to the needs for assigned grantees. So just to be clear on that, so we have the COSSUP program, which is the site-based comprehensive opioid stimulant and substance use program. And so there's grant recipients for that particular program that may be pursuing OFR related efforts. And so the awardee would actually have to work with those grant recipients that actually receive grant funds and are doing OFR work. Another deliverable will be to actually work with those grantees to help support their implementation of OFRs or enhancement if they have existing OFRs, or if they're planning an OFR as well. Also, deliverable will be to offer ad hoc training and technical assistance that could be on-site or virtual to states, localities, and tribes and also there may be other practitioners that make requests for training and technical assistance as well. And then you all would consult with us as you pursue those efforts. Building and maintaining a technical skill set and experience to complete project tasks. So, as far as having the faculty or the subject matter expertise to be able to carry out the deliverables for the project and the field would be something that you would have to be sure that you'd be able to meet that particular criteria. Next slide, please. So yeah, maintaining contact as far as like a list of. I'm sorry. Can we go back to the previous slide? Sorry, great. Okay, thank you. So proactively building field knowledge and capacity. Again, I mentioned our ofrtools.org. So, part of that, part of your role would be to kind of make sure that we have a website maintained that will help with providing that timely information to the field. Also publications, having experts speak on webinars, those kinds of things would be part of that. Participating in ongoing collaboration and coordination. Again, I mentioned other training and technical assistance providers, but there is overlap in some of the work. So it's very important to make sure that you're collaborating with other TA partners and coordinating your efforts to really maximize our resources that are available to support these projects. Serving as a thought leader and information clearinghouse for relevant research and best practices. Again, that goes to just having a strategy in place that would enable you to be able to serve as a clearinghouse and a go-to resource to offer information regarding research and best practices. Demonstrating knowledge, skills, and propose innovative strategies that will employ to support COSSUP grantees as they deliver services for historically marginalized and underserved populations. So one of the priority areas that BJA has in their site-based grant programs is that if in some training and technical assistance programs is that if they can demonstrate that they are providing a certain percentage of funding in their budgets or having certain organizations that will be available to actually serve historically marginalized and underserved populations, then we would hope that whoever the TA provider is will be able to support the grantees in that priority area as they work to serve underserved and historically marginalized populations. Next slide, please. Maintaining a list of grantees, sub-grantees, and key contacts that are undertaking grant and related activities will be an expectation. Also providing quarterly reports to us on the implementation status of assigned grantees. And so that could be information around, if there are challenges, if there are successes, those kinds of things that would be included in those reports. And that would be for the cohort or the assigned grantees that you are managing. Submit year-end annual reports to include best practices, success stories, and site-based activity. Again, that gets back to the grantees because that information is actually going to be helpful to the field, to maybe other jurisdictions that are, working to implement OFR strategies. And so we would expect that you all would work with us to actually be able to help promulgate information regarding those kinds of practices. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about eligibility and program and application requirements. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as far as eligibility is concerned, you can see here public and state-controlled institutions of higher education, as well as private institutions of higher education, nonprofits having 501c3 status, nonprofits that do not have 501c3 status, for-profit organizations and small businesses are eligible as well Next slide, please. Other eligibility considerations, just so just to keep in mind. So you can have a subrecipient or sub-award. You can be a subrecipient or a sub-grantee in more than one application. So if let's say you have two organizations that are applying for the grant that would want you as a subrecipient, then there's no limitation on doing that. Also, we will consider applications under which two or more entities would carry out a federal award. However, only one entity may be the applicant for the solicitation. So that kind of gets back to that sub-grantee or sub-recipient. There may be some sort of memorandum of understanding that you have in place with another organization, but there would have to be one primary organization that would be accountable and responsible for all the grant reporting and everything else that goes along with the grant or the cooperative agreement, I should say. And just to be clear, it's so the mechanism for this particular funding is a cooperative agreement as opposed to a grant. And the difference is there's a difference in the relationship, whereas a grant, there's less federal involvement, whereas a cooperative agreement, there's going to be more federal involvement as far as partnering with you to make sure that to review and make sure the grant deliverables are quality oriented, and that any events that you have are that we approve of those events and the goals and objectives associated with those events, as well as reviewing publications. We want to make sure that we have eyes on that as well. So just wanted to take a second to explain the difference between a grant and a cooperative agreement, just in case folks needed that information. Next slide, please. So there are basic minimum requirements to this grant program. What that means is if there are certain elements of the grant application are not submitted or included, then your grant application will not be considered for funding. And so I'm going to go over those basic minimum requirements so that you all are aware of those. But I'm also just going to talk generally about everything that's included in that needs to be included in the application. So the proposal abstract, even though that's not going to preclude you from moving to the next level of grant review, in other words, that's not a basic minimum requirement, it is still something that you'll need to submit with your grant application. And so what the proposal abstract is it's a public-facing project summary that really touches on the purpose of the program, the activities, any outcomes, services, the service area that you are going to be focusing on, as well as any subrecipients and beneficiaries of your services. It can't be any more than 400 words, and it has to be completed as a Just Grants web-based form. And if you want more information on that web-based form, you can see the application resource guide for an example, and I know the link to that is in the solicitation. The proposal narrative, and we'll talk a little bit about the weight of each of the components, but the proposal narrative is really where you're going to be describing, challenges with planning, implementing, or expanding OFRs, defining the need for OFR TA, really making sure you lay out a very detailed strategy that articulates the vision for the role of the training and technical assistance for grantees and non-grantees. And there's also a timeline that I'll talk about shortly that you'll need to complete as part of the proposal narrative. And that timeline should have the deliverables, the goals and objectives associated with the project, as well as the projected quarter in which each objective and deliverable will be completed. We also want to know that you have the capacity to be able to provide national level training and technical assistance as an organization. And so we're going to ask for information around the capacity of your organization as it relates to like key personnel that, that are going to be available to deliver the required services. And for those key personnel, we're going to want to see resumes. We're also going to want, if you have any sort of subrecipients, we want to know the qualification of those subrecipients as well, and if they have the capabilities to be able to carry out the goals and objectives of the project. Also, you'll need to describe your performance measures. We don't ask for you to provide information on performance measures, during the grant application process, but we will request that information post-award. And so you'll need to at least describe in your narrative what process you're going to use to collect that performance measurement data, and identify the person or group that's going to be responsible for collecting and reporting on that required performance measures data that's actually outlined in the performance measure section of the application. And that's required. The proposal narrative, if that's not in there, then your application will not move forward to the next step. The budget should be complete. It should be the information in there should be reasonable, allocable, and necessary for project activities. We want to see any information around any required meetings that you're going to be hosting as part of this effort for each, and that needs to be budgeted for each year. The more detail you can provide in the budget narrative around each budget line item, the better, because what happens is, and I'm sorry, that's a web-based form as well in Just Grants that you'll need to complete. But what happens is if your budget is not detailed, then if you do get the award, it's really going to delay the time that it takes for you to get that budget approval and get the funds so that you can begin the project. So please make sure that that is detailed. Each item is allowable, and you describe each item in detail. So that'll be helpful. And breakdowns, like instead of just providing lump sums, if you can break something down by the unit or by the hour or by, the more you can provide breakdowns, the better as well. The application for federal assistance, or SF424 as it's called, and there's the SFLLL. Those definitely have to be completed for the project to or your application to be submitted. And I'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. And then there's also some additional application components that are requirements that are basic minimum requirements that you'll have to submit that I'll talk about momentarily as well. So far from this particular slide, the things that you need to come away with that must be included for your application to move forward is a proposal narrative and the budget worksheet and budget narrative. And obviously the SF424 has to be completed in order for you to move forward with application submission. Next slide, please. So as far as our review criteria, I talked a little bit about meeting the basic minimum requirements and what needs to be included to do that. As far as the weight of the application is concerned, so you'll have some review criteria here where there's a certain percentage that's allocated for the project design and implementation. That's actually 40%. The capabilities and competencies, that's 35%. Description of the issue is 10%. Then the plan for collecting the data, 5%, and the budget is 10%. So you can just see here that the project narrative is very important. The capacities and competencies as well. I'm sorry, capabilities and competencies, very, very highly weighted. But as every point counts, because when these applications are going through peer review, we've seen some razor thin scores where it was, a 5% or a 10% can really make the difference. And so, with the description, obviously, of the issue, you really want to evaluate. That's really going to be looking at the applicant's understanding of the program issue to be addressed when when that goes to review. As far as project design and implementation, we're going to be evaluating the strength of the proposal, including information provided in the goals, objectives, the timelines and deliverables, that web-based form that we just discussed as far as the timeline is concerned. The capabilities and competencies, we're going to be looking at the applicant's administrative and technical capacity to successfully accomplish the goals and objectives. And then, for the plan for collecting data, we really want to ensure that the applicant understands the performance data reporting requirements and the plan for collecting required data. And then for the budget, we'll be looking at the completeness, cost effectiveness, allowability of budget items, and ensuring that it's all tied to the program project narrative. That's going to be important as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so the additional components that I want to highlight here is the timeline that's a web-based form. The resumes, as I mentioned before, those need to be submitted for key personnel. Any letters of support, if applicable, and obviously if you have letters of support, or you may have memorandum of understanding, either or sometimes both. But obviously with the memorandum of understanding, that's really going to be focused a lot on relationships that you might have with subrecipient that's going to be part of the project. And so you should make sure that it is really clear what services that the subrecipient is going to be provided, and if a memorandum of understanding is needed, then that should be part of the grant application. Sample work products. And so one of the things that we want to see is some high quality products that the organization has produced that demonstrates the ability to communicate effectively with stakeholders. That could be fact sheets, that could be archived webinars, that could be technical assistance reports with recommendations, or other publications. But that's a requirement. If those are not submitted, then your application will not move forward for further review. And then there's a financial management and system of internal controls questionnaire that will have to be completed as part of the application submission. And so you would also have to indicate there if your organization has a high risk status. And then as far as research and evaluation is concerned, if you are proposing to do any research or evaluation, then you must demonstrate that you have research evaluation independence and integrity by including the appropriate safeguards before we would award funding. So that's a statement that you would need to have in your application. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to apply. So all the applications do need to be submitted through grants.gov and is ultimately completed in Just Grants. So there's two different systems that you'll have to go through. And those of you that have done the process before realize that there's a registration process that you must complete. So before submitting your application, you got to register with the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. And then if you have, maybe you have applied for grants in the past, but maybe haven't applied within the last 12 months. But please realize that you must renew your registration every 12 months for SAM. So if you haven't done that, then I would go into the system today to do that. If you don't renew your registration, it will expire, and that will definitely cause a delay and prevent you from submitting your application. And so as far as the once you've registered with SAM.gov, then you'll be able to submit your SF424 and the SFLLL in grants.gov. And so once you have to, that step only takes about 10 minutes or so, but you have to do that in order to actually move to the next stage of the grant process. And so you should really begin, if you haven't registered, you should really have started, you should do that process 30 days prior to the deadline, because that's definitely a necessity to move to the grants.gov stage, or to grants.gov and then ultimately to Just Grants. Next slide, please. The dates here, as far as submission, it's 8:59 p.m. Eastern time. July 17th is when you have to have your SF424 and SFLL submitted in grants.gov. And so that again only takes about 10 minutes, but it is a required step. And then the full application must be submitted in grants.gov by 8:59 Eastern time, July 24th. And so if for some reason you're not able to get the full application submitted in Just Grants, there is a waiver process that we do have, but just waiting until the due date, and if you have some issues before the due date that prevents you from submitting your application, that may not be sufficient or an acceptable reason to request a waiver. But we do know that in some instances, there are some unforeseen technical issues that do come up that prevent you from submitting an application. And the application clearly lays those circumstances out. But the earlier you start, the better. And because if you do have issues or if you do have problems, we would want you to follow up with our help desk. We have a help desk that can help you with Just Grants issues. But we do want to make sure that you should actually, if you have any sort of interaction with the help desk, please get a ticket number. Because if there does get to where you need to submit a waiver, it's going to be important to have all that information well documented. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about application resources. Next slide, please. So for the entire application process, there is an application resource guide where it really walks you through each section of the application and provides you with guidance on how to complete certain requirements of the application. And so there's a web address there at the bottom of the slide deck here that you'll be able to access that guide. Next slide, please. We have work aids, we have job aids to help with the Just Grants process. So if you have issues or you have questions about the process, these work aids are really helpful. So you can access those guides by going to justgrants.usdoj.gov. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not going to go into too much depth about the grants.gov and Just Grants process, but I do want to highlight that here's all the information around support, around there's a phone number for the hotline for grants.gov as well as Just Grants, and it has the times here that those help desk or those resources are available. And so there's the email addresses as well if you want to email those questions. Next slide, please. Okay, and here is just, if you want to get email updates on the Office of Justice Program's funding opportunities or resources, then, please visit www.ojp.gov and then become a subscriber. And that way you'll get a lot of the updates around the latest news regarding OJP, as well as, funding news for the various OJP offices, et cetera. But please, you feel free to register that way. And then here we have our social media, where if you want to connect with us, you can see here, there's all the information there to connect with us via social media. Next slide, please. And also, like, if you have programmatic specific questions, like regarding the grant program or the cooperative agreement, the solicitation, then you can actually contact our response center, and that person or whoever whoever gets your response will contact either myself or whoever the appropriate person would be to respond to your inquiry. Next slide, please. Okay, just a reminder that there are two different deadlines, one for grants.gov, one for Just Grants. The grants.gov one's July 17th The one for Just Grants is July 24th. So that's like a week after. Please read the solicitation carefully. And one of the things I'd like to highlight is if you don't have a response for something, or if you don't have data available, or if there's information that you're missing, please be clear about maybe why you're missing that information, and don't make the assumption that whoever's going to be peer reviewing your application will know why that information is not there. They're just going to take off points because they just see that the application is not responsive to the grant requirements. Next slide, please. Again, just more information or references for grants.gov and Just Grants. Okay, and I'd like to, at this point, to ask before we go to Q&A, do my colleagues have anything to offer, like Aaron, Jocelyn, anything you wanted to mention?
Thanks, Julius. I would just reiterate again the two deadlines, making sure that you're applying well in advance for both the grants.gov and the Just Grants deadlines. And then also for resources related to the application submission in Just Grants, there are a lot of resources and a lot of different guides available on the Just Grants pages, including detailed step-by-step user guides that will walk you through every step of the application process, and then also the weekly webinar series that you can register for to get help with questions regarding application submission, or just to kind of get some additional guidance. So just want to reiterate the resources that Julius covered.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Okay, so I guess we'll go to our Q&A. I see we have a question here. Let's see, one around sample work products. Yeah, so as far as products are concerned, I know we're not specific here. The question here is whether we're looking for commercialized products. And preferably like public facing products would definitely hold a lot of weight. But if it's internal, or if it's not public facing, then those are acceptable as well. There's nothing that precludes you from submitting something that's not public facing. So either one. Hope that answers that question. So the next question we have here is around, says here, we have 2 alpha prototypes for narcotic detection devices that provide results wirelessly to smartphone or computer. These 2 products will need FDA approval. We can work with the software for collecting information for this particular research, but there seems to be more detailed work. I'm not sure if this grant is a good fit. Would it make sense to apply with what we have? Our particular program is actually really focused on providing assistance to the field to implement OFR strategies. And so kind of based on this particular, like this narcotics detection device really would not fall within the scope of this particular project, just because the COSSUP program is really focused more around rehabilitation, reducing substance use overdoses, as opposed to narcotics detection strategies. So this may not be the right program for that particular effort. Let's see, another question we have here. Our examples of our work are often internal and require via web applications. I'm not sure how to share those sources that would be able to showcase our ability to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it's definitely, the examples definitely have to be something that is going to be tangible, that like we would be able to see. So I'm not sure if there's, if there's a way to maybe provide screenshots or something of that work or something. But it's definitely something that we need to be able to see, and that our reviewers are going to need to be able to see as well. So I would just keep that in mind to hopefully maybe you can figure out a way to be able to showcase those sources. So hopefully I answered those questions. Oh, I see. Are we able to provide the required login for the peer reviewer? Yeah, if that's if that's a mechanism that's going to help someone navigate through that work product, then yeah, that would be okay. I don't know if your organization's security will allow that. So you would just have to make it clear that you've went through the proper security protocols with your organization to allow, or maybe if it's a demo or something, or something where it's not live, but it still gives the person an idea of kind of what the resource or what the source is. Then that would, I would try to work on that. But we just don't, we want to make sure that we're not compromising any of your security protocols by providing any sort of login information to our reviewers if it's not authorized. So just to make that clear. Yeah, and so they could see the resources internal, so they could see the resources internal info. Yes, I mean, yeah, I mean, whatever you can do to be able to provide that information to the reviewer so that the reviewers can be able to take a look at that. That would be helpful. See, we work for the government and they will provide a login, just not sure who to share it with. I think, if that information can be, if that can be part of the, let me take a look into that. I think we can, because I don't know if that's something that it would need to just go to me and I share it with the reviewers. I think it would be helpful if we can get a little bit more information on what this resource is and kind of how we can make it available to the reviewers. So if Ms. McGinnis, if you could maybe email me outside of this forum. My email address is julius.dupree@usdoj.gov. Then that would be helpful. And then then that way I can make sure I can also talk with my legal department if needed. Okay, another question here is I'm trying to set up a QRT in my county. Do you think this grant could help with that? I wanted to call it Port Post Overdose Response Team. So this grant or this cooperative agreement is more a national focused project. So what it is whoever the recipient is for this particular grant would actually need to be able to provide training and technical assistance nationally. So it can't be a project that's just focused on a county or a local jurisdiction. But if you do want training and technical assistance or help with that, then we do have training and technical assistance that can help you with implementing that are in your overdose response in your community or your jurisdiction. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions come up here. Oh, wait, I do see some more here, I think. No, I don't. Okay. Okay. I guess if there are no more questions here, we can get ready to close it out. Wanted to thank everyone for joining today's call, and also thank you to my colleagues for joining today and Kiana as well. So hopefully you all got the information that you needed. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You have my email address as well. So thank you.